everyone, and welcome to this very special segment sponsored by StockCharts TV, the 2021 market review. And the question that I was asked by StockCharts is, what one chart would I think would be one of the most influential aspects of what happened this year as we come to the end of a very interesting year? And if you ask me, of course, there's always many influences with the Federal Reserve and with government policy and with obviously the variant. But the one thing that we all must do, regardless of what happens in life, is we must eat. So to me, what I think was the most influential move of the year was the move that we've seen in many of the raw materials that have to do with food. So I wanted to focus on the chart DBA because what that did was reverse from a huge downtrend. It had been in a downtrend pretty much since 2013, but even before that, since 2008. And then what happened in 2021 was that it reversed that downtrend, crossing over an 80-month moving average, which goes back over 5-6 years, when it's finally cleared a price of $18.25. Food costs themselves have risen over 30% this year. So when we talk about inflation, or we hear people talk about inflation, obviously they're looking at things like used car prices and new cars and rentals and wages. But really what we all feel is when we go to the supermarket, we feel the pinch. Like, for example, what just happened at Thanksgiving, where food prices went up a lot, but also what we're seeing through supply chain issues. I went to the supermarket just recently and saw a lot of the shelves have been cleaned out. And also because the labor market, some of these supermarkets are having trouble keeping any staff to help just as far as cashiers and bagging, et cetera. Now, it's not just food. DBA represents also soft commodities. And so we've seen a huge rise in coffee prices and in sugar prices. And a lot of this that you cannot control with any kind of policy has to do with good old Mother Nature. And so not only is 2021 have wreaked some havoc with drought and then floods, but then we have Brazil, that coffee region really got destroyed. But can we look forward to the same thing happening in 2022? And with La Nina, it's definitely possible. So let's take a look at the chart. All right, so I wanted to give you some perspective here on DBA. Now, I've heard a lot of talk about people who say they cannot trade DBA because of in their IRA accounts or whatever. And so I like to use DBA as an example, but certainly if you can trade futures, some of these individual raw materials are very easy to trade in terms of the futures market, like, for example, coffee futures or sugar futures, or in the case of soybean futures or corn futures or wheat futures. DBA is just a really good look at how much impact this food inflation has created in terms of the price. So I have here on my charts, typical, those of you who've seen me week after week know that I use two major moving averages here. This is the daily chart, the 200-day, and the blue is the 50-day moving average. And then we have our two plugins here. This would be the leadership against the benchmark, the SPY, and this would be our momentum indicator or our real motion indicator, also that uses a 50 and a 200-day moving average. So when we talk about how influential this has been, if we look at the start of 2020, right before we saw the first COVID strike, we moved down in food prices because there was just a liquidity crisis. But it was obvious that that move could turn around because we started to hear about supply chain. We started to hear about these cargo ships out there. We started to hear about countries hoarding food, particularly China, that has a lot of people to feed. And so then added on top of that some weather issues. And that's when we really started to base out here back in the early part of 2020, really. And then as we got into the summer, we see that we changed phases here into what we call from a bearish phase, and this is where we had the death cross, into a recuperation phase, and then eventually an accumulation phase. And then when the 50 crossed back over the 200, that's when we went into a bull phase. We didn't even get to 2021 yet. So if we just go and scroll out from 2021, starting here, we can see what happened. The DBA prices started out at around 16, and we went up to about 2042. You can see the high right here. And now we've come off, tested the 50-day moving average, and we've popped back up again. And you can certainly see the rise in momentum. Now, I wanted you to see this on a daily chart because the other important thing was that really basically after we made that big move up from essentially May until really we got into November, we were kind of going sideways, and we had this big breakout, and it looked like things were just going to go flying again, but they've come off a little bit. Now, to me, what seems interesting is we're back in the range, is that with a new variant and closures that we're seeing, particularly in Europe, hopefully not going to happen in the United States. But again, another disruption that will happen throughout globally when in terms of not only growing food, but getting food out there. We could see another surge back as we get into 2022. Let's just also take a look here at the weekly chart so you can get a different perspective. Now, in the weekly chart, if we go through 2021, let me bring this out a little bit here. No, excuse me, that goes back to 2015. Well, actually, that's kind of interesting. Let's go back a little bit in time, because when I said that we had been in a downtrend, we had that one spike before the market crashed in 2008, and then you can see it's gone up and down, but really, this is the bulk of the downtrend I was talking about until COVID hit, and we've done nothing but go up since then. So if we look at this weekly chart here, you get a little bit of a different picture, because not only did we get into a bull trend after being really in bad phases for years and years and years, but it's not quite as dramatic, that drop from the high on the weekly chart as we saw on the daily chart. And you can really see here the consolidation. So essentially, if you just want to take a look at not only what has influenced us, our own pockets, but some of the inflation narrative, and definitely in terms of policy that cannot control what happens in the growing regions going forward, look here not only for what happened in 2021, but also what could happen and transpire in 2022. With that, I wish you all very happy holidays and look forward to seeing you again.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.